Welcome to Aero Velocity's Drone On podcast. I'm your host, Will Gilliland, and I get to interview experts and leaders within the drone industry. And so today I was going to record this intro down kind of by the waterfall over here, and it was just too noisy. And so I stopped recording and I was starting to walk up, and there was a beaver just like 4 or 5 feet away from me, scared the crap out of me. And of course, I didn't get it on recording, but decided to come up to this bridge instead. So anyways, today I've got the pleasure of speaking with Doug Heidenreich, who is the Aerial Geomatics Coordinator for Indiana's Department of Transportation. And Doug's going to talk about his background flying as a test pilot for companies like UPS Flight Forward, as well as Workhorse Aerospace, doing drone delivery stuff, as well as he's going to talk about his current position with the Department of Transportation in Indiana. Give us some insights on how state agencies like his are using drones and how they are changing the future landscape of drones as tools. So stay tuned for more episodes. Next week, I've got Randall Warnes, CEO of Anzu Robotics, and I also just recorded with Anthony Knight, who is a multi-time grand champion drone racer, and he's going to talk about some of the work he's doing with multi-GP. So stick around and follow for more. And now I'll turn it over to Doug. Thanks.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Doug Heidenreich. I'm the Aerial Geomatics Coordinator for Indiana Department of Transportation, specifically the Land and Aerial Survey Office. So just kind of my background, I went to college at Indiana State University. I got a bachelor's degree, a double major in unmanned systems and aviation management. Graduated in December of 2020. And then in January of 21, I got my first job in the industry. I went to work for UPS Flight Forward. So some people know a lot about them, some people don't. But they were the first Part 135 airline for a drone. So they had a few operations when I was there, one in Florida and two in North Carolina. I think that's changed a little bit now. But we were operating the Matternet M2V9 aircraft. My position there, I was a remote pilot in command level 1. So for any Part 107 stuff they did, I was a pilot. And then for the 135 airline stuff, I was a VO because at the time they required at least a commercial pilot's license to be an actual pilot. And then through that, I met some of the guys from Workhorse because they were working with each other. So I decided to kind of jump ship from UPS and transition from the operations side to kind of more like the testing side that we did at Workhorse, now Aero Velocity. Then we packed up, moved to Cincinnati, worked there for 2.5 years. I worked with you. I was mainly doing the OEM testing, and then I dabbled a little bit with Tommy in the sensor platform. So I had a few trips down to Mississippi myself. And then kind of when the whole change from Workhorse to Aero Velocity, kind of when that was happening, I've talked with my wife, and we kind of wanted to move back home to Indiana. And so I thought that was a good time to kind of explore options. And I came across this job and I interviewed for it. And then in May of 24, we moved here and I got started with NDOT. So
it kind of worked out because you're originally from Indiana, right?
Yeah. So I'm from a little town called Washington, Indiana. It's between Evansville and Bloomington, Indiana, if you know those two places. It's about an hour and a half away from Indianapolis, south. So.
Yeah, I see the Colts stuff in your background.
yeah, a big Colts fan.
Yeah. Sure. So, some of your experience as a test pilot, and that that's kind of where we became acquaintances
Hmm.
and colleagues. Um, how did that kind of prep you for some of the work you're doing with the Department of Transportation in Indiana?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it was you learned a lot of piloting skills doing the R&D stuff. So, once you fly some experimental type aircraft that, you have to take over because it's, doing something wonky because you're testing something new, that definitely helps with the maneuvering the aircraft. And then, uh, yeah, and then when we did the sensor stuff, that kind of helped me dip my toes into the specific maneuvers you do, like for calibrations, and then just kind
Hmm.
of what the normal workflow looks like. And then also with the R&D pilot stuff, we had pretty strict procedures, and so that was kind of nice to be able to bring that into the land and aerial survey office because I'm used to having very strict workflows and stuff, so that helped.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like almost treating it like an airline or an actual aircraft, or like an actual airplane. Using checklists
Hmm.
and maintenance logs and kind of all that stuff that a pilot would. It's very easy to transition into drone stuff because we use a lot of airline stuff to get our basis.
Hmm.
Especially for training. Number of hours, logging, that
Hmm.
type of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of have to, when you're operating in the national airspace, especially if you're close to airports and having to get land authorization. You kind of have to make sure you know what you're doing. That way you don't accidentally fly into the approach path or something because, that can put people in danger. So you have to treat it like an actual aircraft. I mean, because it's registered.
Hmm.
And it just helps keep everyone safe if you treat it like a manned airplane. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about your role as the Aerial Geomatics Coordinator at the Indiana Department of Transportation?
Yeah, so our office, so the Land and Aerial Survey Office, it's split up into two, the aerial and the land side.
Hmm.
So I have a manager that oversees the office as a whole. He kind of deals with the financing, the overall managerial stuff, and then where me and my land survey counterpart, where we come in, is I oversee the aerial survey section as a whole. So that's anything to do with the aircraft, the sensors, the software, and then my counterpart deals with the land survey stuff for the state. So
Hmm.
kind of any time that one of the six districts in Indiana wants to get an aircraft for surveying purposes, I'm usually in those meetings giving suggestions, all that kind of stuff. And then
Hmm.
another thing I do is me and one of my coworkers, me and him perform most of the flights for the Land and Aerial Survey Office. Um, so that's testing out, new aircraft we got, just the actual normal operations and any projects that other departments kind of want to see if we can do. I kind of head that up. And then I also kind of conduct slash oversee the data processing. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and then a big part of it's just scheduling what we're gonna do when, what works best. So
Yeah. What kind of aircraft do you primarily work with or use?
yeah, so before I got there, well, a few months before I got there, they had to get an NDAA compliant aircraft.
Yeah.
So they had an entire DJI fleet, had a couple Phantoms, had some M300, some Inspires. And basically, the state said, yeah, we're not going to be able to support that anymore. So while we can still use them sometimes, depending on the purpose, if we have a battery go dead, we can't use it. Like we had a battery go bad for the 300 and we can't replace it. So
So
we're
it's kind
down.
of like a grandfathered in type of thing.
Yeah, for us anyway. So we are allowed to use DJI on some products, but the thing is, a lot of NDOT projects have some federal funding of some sort in there. And with federal funding, you can't use DJI products. So,
Gotcha.
because of that, the first NDAA compliant aircraft we got was the Wingtra Gen 2. And then
Hmm.
just recently, about a month ago, we got the EBX in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
Excellent.
those are the two we are flying right now, and then we're working on getting a free fly Astro with
Mhm.
a Mapper Plus and just the Sony camera that they come with it.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of something that, even dating back to the workhorse days was something that was always kind of cognizant of, and
Mm-hmm.
we kept in mind was NDAA compliance.
Yeah.
Specifically with the Falcon, when we were really uh, interested in seeing if there was military
Mm-hmm.
application, first responder, and government type work,
Yeah.
and so that mindset kind of led us to where we are currently at Aero Velocity,
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of our data collection. A lot of it can be government. A lot of our contracts are through government agencies, and
Mm-hmm.
so that was kind of our mindset originally from the get-go, is let's kind of focus in on NDAA compliant aircraft and set ourselves up in case that did come down, which you know we're starting to see movements in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's now you're seeing it at a government level,
Yeah.
like you're saying. So, what type of sensors are you mostly working with?
Yeah. So just overall, we use RGB and
Mm-hmm.
LiDAR. More specifically, on the wing tread, they have their own LiDAR unit, and then we use their RGB 61. So it's a 61 megapixel normal camera.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the EB, we're using their SOTA 3D camera. I believe it's 24 megapixel, and then it has the option to do oblique or just nadir. Um, and then if and when we get the Astro, like I said, it's going to be the Yellow Scan Mapper Plus, and then their RGB camera that comes with it.
Yeah, and Air Velocity is actually going to be doing a webinar with Yellow Scan
Okay.
here in a couple of weeks. So we're excited to kind of explore some of the case studies and the uses
Mm-hmm.
that we've been using it for. But you know, when you guys are using LiDAR, what specifically is it that you are scanning at the Department of Transportation?
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that we're doing with LiDAR, of course, it's mostly along the roadways, but if we just
Mm-hmm.
want hardscape, we do photogrammetry. So for LiDAR, we use that more for if we kind of want the embankments, if we want features that are, like below the road height. So ditches, culverts, that kind of stuff. So anything that kind of leaks over that edge of the crown of the road or the edge of the road, that's kind of when we want to use LiDAR instead of the RGB. Or sometimes if we have a lot of tree overhang on the road, we'll use LiDAR to extract to try to kind of penetrate that canopy to get some
Mm-hmm.
features down in there.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Potholes, the erosion, that type of stuff. Is that anything that's kind of factored into your scanning missions?
So actually, just recently, well, I should say it started in 2021. They wanted to do a pavement patching table. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they started doing that. Like I said, I think it was 2021, and then it kind of got put on hold. And then just recently, we're going to start up doing that again. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly, let's say 10-mile portions of mainly the interstates, kind of in the Indianapolis area. And what we're going to do after we fly that, we're going to hand it to kind of two different groups of people. One's going to be designers and engineers, so they can plan and kind of design on those images, and then kind of have a very updated picture of what it looks like. And then for the patching side, so what we're going to do is we're going to fly that, and then hopefully be able to kind of detect some cracks, potholes, delamination, kind of some stuff like that that needs fixed on the roadways. And then so we'll kind of compare that with information that the contractors, like the construction contractors, the information they give, and kind of compare those, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, and construction could be a very dangerous job. You're
Mm-hmm.
out on active highways. You've got cars flying by, and I can only imagine that
the type of work that your department's doing is, there's got to be a huge safety aspect to that, keeping people out of harm's way. Yeah.
A big thing for us why we like to use drones when we can is instead of having to have a guy walk up and down the road and potentially a two-man crew, depending on what they're surveying, having to take, shots every 25 feet plus any features, they can instead go out there, grab 8 ground control points and some checkpoints and get off the road, have us come fly. And then instead of them having 2 days of work out in the field, they can do 2 hours of work. And then the rest of the time is spent in the office on software instead of out in the elements and, in traffic and stuff like that. So it's just they still do about the same amount of work, but it's in a safer aspect and it's more advanced work than taking shots. So it just kind of transitions from out in the field.
It's got to be a lot more efficient, I'm assuming, as well.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, so I'll do like a LiDAR point cloud, for example. Let's say they want contours. Traditionally it's 25 feet you do a shot, whereas for LiDAR from an aerial platform, you have shots all along that entire 25 feet instead of just a blank spot. So you'll see contours are more accurate. There's more shots, and if you miss something with traditional land survey, you have to go back out and shoot that. If like, oh man, I forgot to get that culvert. You have to go back out. You have to reshoot it. You have to do all that again. Where if you have a giant LiDAR point cloud, you're like, oh, let me just go over here so I can see it.
Yeah. One of the projects we had done recently with Aero Velocity with the NRCS is some of the watershed scanning. And I can't remember exactly who it was that told me this, but they said some of the previous work they had done before they started using Aero Velocity was literally getting in boats and getting to the sides of banks. And, as you can imagine, some of the work was down in the south where alligators, water moccasins. So keeping them out of the water and out of harm's way, they were very thankful to us, that we could put the drone in the air and keep them getting bit by snakes and stuff. So that was something that, I kind of thought about as working in the Department of Transportation, keeping you out of the roads, keeping you out of the ditches, being able to use the drone is just there's such excellent tools for efficiency and safety. And it's really cool. How long has the Department of Transportation been utilizing drones? Is this something recent, or is this, how many years does this kind of go back?
So let's see, I'm trying to think. I believe it was like 2016, kind of. That's kind of when the drone buzz really kind of started up for like outside of military stuff, right? I mean, that's when I got my first drone, the Phantom 3. That's when you saw it was normal for people to have drones. I think that's about the time when NDOT started using drones, at least kind of in my area of work. So I think it was about then, and then they kind of really got serious with it a couple of years later. So,
yeah, and not that this really pertains to your department, but I saw something recently that in a couple states, their Department of I don't know if it's their transportation, but anyways, they're using drones for accident investigation, where if there's a bad accident, it may take couple hours to get all the pictures. Instead, they could use drones with photogrammetry and LiDAR and scan an area in a fraction of the time and still have centimeter accuracy of citing when the car actually hit the brakes or where this ar slid off and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. You had meant. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say when I was at Geo Week last week, he wasn't with the Utah Department of Transportation, but worked very, very closely with them. So Utah and all of their, I don't know exactly what it's called, like their accident management team or investigation team. They all have their 107s, and each one is equipped with an aircraft. So
Wow.
every time there's an accident, like a serious accident, they go and they pop the drone up in the air, and they map the area for that reason. So that's
Mhm.
kind of cool to tie that to
Yeah,
what I just heard about.
that's really
So
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you're at Geo Week last week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, representing the Department of Transportation. What were some of the things that you were kind of looking for or hoping to get
Yeah.
out of it?
So a big thing was just learning.
Hmm.
So using both their paid and their free learning sessions. We learned a lot of great information, and some of it I knew, but to hear it explained by an ASPRS scientist level person kind of made stuff click. Like, okay, I understand why that's important. I mean, I always follow their standards, but to hear the reason why was nice. So the education was a big part of it, and then actually getting to meet some of the vendors we've been talking to in person was nice as well. So some different software, some different sensor companies. I mean, it was nice to kind of see them in person and get to ask them questions, see their products in person, and get kind of like software demos on the computer. That was nice, and then just the
Hmm.
networking as well.
Yeah, those shows are excellent. The networking side
Mm-hmm.
is huge. And Aero Velocity is going to be at Exponential here, I think at the end of May. I
Yeah,
believe this year it's in Texas. I want to say
yeah,
Houston, but
yeah. Houston.
yeah. So I think Mark and I will be there this year, and you know those shows are so cool because you can learn so much.
Mm-hmm.
But like you had mentioned, the networking as well
Yeah.
is fantastic. Um, let's see. So you had mentioned some of the projects that you're working on, and I wanted to ask you about the SMART grant and see if you can explain that a little bit and how you guys are going about that.
Yeah. So when I got here in May, I worked for a couple weeks, and then I had someone from LinkedIn reach out and was like, "Hey, I'm in the Indianapolis area, and kind of like welcome." He's like, "Also, you should try to apply for the SMART grant." He's like, you can get up to $2 million for your program, if they select you. I'm like, huh. I'm like,
Wow.
okay. So
Yeah.
I looked into it, and I was like, I think we have a chance of getting awarded one of these slots. So the name of it is Building Local Capacity for Aerial Survey. So there's kind of three main parts to it. One is NDAA compliance. We kind of put it out there that, hey, NDAA compliance, people have their opinions, but I could see why it's important. But doing so is pricey.
Hmm.
DJI is so cheap and so good, where
Hmm.
most of the time NDAA compliant sensors and softwares tend to be more pricey, and you know we don't have most people don't have a whole lot of experience with NDAA compliant products. So
Hmm.
kind of part of it is you really have to kind of get your hands on the products, whether it be software, sensors, platforms, to really form an opinion on it. And so part of the project is procuring a few different sensors, both LiDAR and RGB, and then a few different aerial platforms to put those sensors on, and then kind of seeing what works best for NDOT and kind of what's easiest to train people on, what gets us the best data, what's the easiest workflows. Um, so that's one part of it. And another part is we're working with a local high school that's just down the road from my office. So it's Purdue Polytechnic High School in Inglewood. And so they work directly with Purdue University. Um, and so it's in like an impoverished area. And so I chose that school because it would be nice to get local kids that are just right down the road, kind of in an impoverished area, some experience both to the aerial survey and land survey side. Um,
Hmm.
so we would go in and train them. We would have them come out to like a local private airport that we fly and kind of test some stuff out at. So I'd bring them out there. We'd go talk to them. We'd give presentations, and then Also, what we are going to be doing is they're going to start up an FPV drone team.
Oh, excellent.
So, I guess they've been wanting to do this for the past few years, but without an initial capital, they didn't really have the money set aside to do that, as well as maintain the program. So, we're going to be giving them some money so they can start up that program, and then they'll be able to keep up with the maintenance and everything like that on the program.
Excellent. And that kind of mirrors some of the stuff that Aero Velocity is kind of working on. Recently, had Tommy Sonderhaus from Sinclair College speak about the UAS program that they have, but also the internship we've kind of started with Sinclair and Aero Velocity. And it's kind of a setting students up on a pathway to get into careers into the drone industry. And it's interesting to see that even the Department of Transportation is taking an active stance and helping kind of set up the next generation of drones. And just my personal opinion, I feel like the drone industry is still at its infancy, but it's growing at a very, very fast rate. And people are taking advantage of like you guys and like us, the ability to use drones as a tool. Not only for safety and efficiency, but just the cost savings alone. Drones are awesome. They're here. They're here. I hope to stay. I know there's some hiccups, kind of like you had mentioned with NDAA compliances and stuff like that, but we can work through that type of stuff and try to progress the drone industry. And so I think that's pretty awesome. And speaking of some challenges, what are some of the you mentioned NDAA compliancy, but what are some other challenges that INDOT and your department specifically are kind of running into?
Yeah, so we have the usuals, everyone, right? Some airspace, some visual line of sight. Everyone kind of deals with that, but something that not necessarily unique, but that's a very relevant issue for us is operating over cars and people. Because 90% of what we do is scanning roads at my office. So that's the reason why we got the EBX, because you didn't have to. It wasn't quite as hard to plan, because planning for the wing tread and off over cars and people is very difficult and takes a lot of time. Whereas the EB, it's category 3, so it has the operations over people. They have the certification for it. So, we can throw it up, and as long as we're not sustained flight over cars or people, we can fly over them, no problem. So that's one thing.
I wanted to ask you about beyond visual line of sight. Is that something that you foresee your department kind of grasping onto here in the future?
Yeah, for sure. That's something I definitely want to get into. I was looking at the newly released Centero 6 from Census. They're going to have both BVLOS and operations over people. So that's something I'd be interested in, to kind of get two birds with one stone. So that's a big thing. So definitely BVLOS is something that would help us, because corridor scanning, you're going probably a mile out in either direction, and then that's when you kind of have to turn around and come back, because at that point you're on the edge of losing visual line of sight. So if we could fly 5 miles down and back of a corridor, that'd be super efficient for us.
Oh yeah, absolutely. At Aero Velocity, we recently have acquired a Quantum Systems Trinity Pro electric vertical takeoff and landing drone, so fixed wing. And I think we just set an internal kind of company record. I think Seth, our chief pilot, and Ricardo Collins recently just did a 58-minute flight down in Mississippi on some of the USDA work that we're doing with minority farmers of the South. And so 58 minutes, originally we had used a lot of heavy lift quadcopter, aircraft, the Alta X free fly systems, and great aircraft, but flight times are nowhere near 50 minutes, and same with the Zoe, the Ace Core Zoe, also another great aircraft, been very reliable for us, and kind of been a workhorse for us. But once you add on the LiDAR, the mapper, or the not the Voyager, but I guess the mapper, those flight times are down to like 10 to less than 15 minutes. So
that's one thing that's huge for us going for corridor scanning is using the wing trend, the EBX. If we have to fly 10 miles of interstate, having that endurance is huge. So because 15-minute flight times for a Department of Transportation, that doesn't really do anything for us. So having those fixed wing drones is definitely huge for us.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, kind of the industry, really embracing fixed wing. Originally it was kind of all quadcopter, and now we're kind of seeing a hybrid of both of them. And it's something that's pretty interesting to see the evolution of that. Kind of speaking of evolution, how do you see, the aerial survey evolving in transportation planning and kind of infrastructure management? How do you kind of see that evolving?
So I think a big thing for everyone is waiting on that Part 108 to come out, kind of whatever that ends up entailing. Supposedly there's going to be some air traffic management for UAS in there, but I'm kind of waiting on that to kind of see where the industry is going to go in terms of operations. But I will say flying long corridors with a drone is becoming easier. The sensors are getting better, the aircrafts are getting better and flying longer. The technology on the software side is getting so much better. Just in the short time I've been in the industry, I've seen flight times double. So I think the big thing for transportation planning and infrastructure management is just the better efficiency. And another thing I'm seeing is more AI integration into the software. So when I was at GeoWeek, I saw a lot of software is using AI, and the stuff that the AI was able to do in such a short amount of time was very impressive. So they were finding potholes and cracks, and they were automatically laying down the line work, where usually you have to do that manually in a software like Open Roads or something. But like TopoDot, you upload the picture or the point cloud, whichever one you do, and it automatically lays out line work and some detect signage and that kind of stuff. So I think the AI integration is going to be huge for the transportation industry.
Yeah, and you're definitely not the first one to mention that I've spoken with, and it's interesting to see how that it will shape more autonomous flight characteristics, and I think, like you said, we'll see that kind of being more implemented into drone scanning and software. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Speaking of the autonomous stuff, just like with the Skydio X10, their autonomous bridge inspection stuff, that's awesome for someone like NDOT, to where you throw it up and it does all the flying for you, and then you can throw into a software that has AI and it detects cracks, chips, stuff like that, which NDOT isn't doing that yet, but that's something that I kind of want to explore.
So. Yeah, it's actually I'm kind of in discussions with a potential guest on the podcast that works with an engineering firm that is actually using drones for bridge inspections.
Okay.
And here in Cincinnati, that's kind of been a big topic the past couple of years. Just recently, we had a fire on, they call it the Big Mac Bridge, painted yellow, but there was some damage to that. 471 highway goes through there and shut it down due to the fire damage of being so hot that it melted a lot of the beams.
Yeah.
And being able to use drones to pinpoint exactly where the damage is at. Even back to the Baltimore Maryland bridge that had the
big collapse.
Yeah. I know they used drones a lot with that, not only for the accident investigation, but kind of pinpointing, where buckles are and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And, kind of like you're saying, using AI, the drones can be a lot more efficient and a lot more precise in dialing in where those areas of concerns are.
Yeah, for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah. Let's see. So, how can companies like Aero Velocity kind of collaborate with state agencies on aerial data collection?
Yeah, so I know in my office in particular, it would be pretty hard just because there's just like a small, I don't want to say a small amount of work, but it's so specific, I guess, for us. But a department like a DNR, so like natural resources, or anything to do with environmental stuff, I feel like that could have huge potential, because they own / control, hundreds of acres across this, actually probably thousands of acres across the state, whether it be, grasslands, wetlands, forest. So like, for example, Indiana, we have the Hoosier National Forest, that it's huge. It goes from the southern part of the state all the way past Bloomington. It goes halfway up the state. So there's stuff like that for the environmental departments. And then also like mine reclamation could be a potential use. I just met someone, he's actually from my hometown within the state, that he does mine reclamation stuff. And he's thought about using drones to kind of help capture some of that data that they want. I was like, hey, I'll be willing to help you out. So there's something there that could be done, just because, like I said, there's so much acreage and so much stuff out there that one department might not be able to cover that. So that's something I could potentially see.
Yeah, and that's kind of something that we're actively we're currently working with the U.S. Forestry Service, who oversees, I want to say, 193 million acres of forest across the United States. And I feel like sometimes a lot of departments, they have a need for the use of drones, if it's LiDAR or multispectral, but then they look at the price tag, and maybe one off, they may have a project here that they're working on, and then 2 years later they may have another project. So that time period in between, they're not getting a great return on investment. So that's where companies like Aero Velocity can kind of come in. We have the aircraft, we have the pilots, we have all that stuff ready to go. And then, a big part of drone stuff is a lot of people don't realize how much the software can cost, the pricing, the subscriptions to the software. And so since we're constantly doing that type of work, it's much easier for a drone service provider to come in and help with that type of grant work. And so,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, something that people could always do is, states have a list of all of their departments. So like Department of Transportation, Department of Natural Resources, so on and so forth. There's 40, 50 departments in the state, and then within each of those departments, you have real estate, environmental, so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, really, you could contact the state like, hey, we offer this service. Is that something that you guys may be interested in? Can we do a demo? Can we at least set up a meeting and talk about it? So that's always an option, is, getting out there, talking to people. So,
yeah, absolutely. And speaking of talking, if somebody were to need to contact you or, the Department of Transportation, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So, we're currently working on getting the land and aerial survey webpage updated. But my email, it's dheidenreich@indot.in.gov. My email is always open for anyone to reach out. Then my boss, his email is on the Land and Aerial Survey page. So it's pretty easy to find. If you type in Indiana Land and Aerial Survey office, it's like the first or second thing to pop up. And then, if you want to contact aviation, they have a page as well. So all that information is pretty easy to get online. Indiana's very public, and most state DOTs or states in general open with how to contact your agencies and everything.
Excellent. And, kind of lastly, you had mentioned, you're kind of seeing a lot more work with fixed wing and possibly BVLOS in the future. Mm-hmm. What are some kind of, upcoming projects, or where do you kind of see the future of your department going?
Yeah, so like I said, we're doing the patching table project, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So one that we're currently doing right now is I-69 and I-465. They call it the I-69 finish line, but it just got done that way. The south of the state and the north of the state is connected via I-69, and the goal is for countrywide is for I-69 to connect Canada and Mexico. So Indiana getting our part finished was a big deal. And so there's about 20 miles of road and intersection that we're actually going to start flying next week. Wow. That they want photogrammetry for asset management. So for road lines, bridges, etc. Just so they have some good data to look at.
Excellent. That's pretty exciting. And kind of encompassing it all, it's really interesting to see how drones are being utilized by branches like the Department of Transportation, and really fascinating stuff. So I really appreciate you coming on and giving us kind of a dive into some of the stuff that you guys are working on, and just another avenue that drones are kind of helping all industries across the board. So
yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity, and always love to kind of spread information about what we're doing at my office. So
yeah, absolutely. Aero Velocity, we're actually going to be at Sinclair. Me and a couple of our graduates are going to be at Sinclair tomorrow. So I'll have some video of that up on our website and our YouTube. And next guest on the podcast will be Randall Warness. He's going to come on and talk about ANZU robotics and some of his background. He's been in the drone industry for a long time, so he's got an amazing resume and knowledge base on the drone industry as a whole. So excited to talk with him. And then in the future, 2 weeks from now, I have Anthony Knight from MultiGP, who's going to talk about some of the stuff that they're doing with FPV racing. And speaking of FPV racing, next Friday, I'll be at the Dayton Air Force Museum, the National Air Force Museum in Dayton, and we'll be up there for the Tiny Whoop FPV race. So if you'd ever heard of that or seen that, it's pretty cool. They allow us to fly little micro drones, kind of like these ones, through the aircraft in the museum. So they have a course set up, and me and one of our pilots are going to be up there representing Aero Velocity. So I think that's kind of all I've got, and I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up.
All righty. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.